He said, "Stop acting like we're married. You don't get a say in where I go or who I'm with." Everyone laughed. I just smiled and stayed quiet. But when he came back from his weekend away, his key didn't work, and the neighbor told him exactly why. "Hello, everyone. My name is Naomi Carter. I'm 31 years old, and for a long time, I believed I was in a relationship that was moving towards something real. Not fast, not dramatic, not the kind people warn you about, just steady." That was the word I kept using whenever friends asked how things were going with Ryan. Steady. We had been together for almost 2 years. We shared an apartment, groceries, bills, and the kind of weekday routine that makes a relationship look more permanent than it really is. From the outside, we probably looked like one of those couples already halfway to marriage. We knew each other's coffee orders, laundry habits, bad moods, and sleep schedules. We had our side of the closet, our side of the bed, our side of the sink. It looked settled. And for a while, I let that fool me into thinking I was safe. Ryan wasn't cruel in obvious ways. That would have been easier to name, easier to fight, easier to leave. He wasn't the kind of man who slammed doors or started screaming matches in restaurants. He didn't need to. What made him dangerous to my peace was subtler than that. He knew how to dismiss without sounding harsh. He knew how to make decisions alone and present them so calmly that questioning them made me feel unreasonable. That was the pattern I noticed too late. The shift didn't start with one huge betrayal. It started with tone. Conversations that used to feel shared slowly became something else. Choices about weekends, money, plans, even little things like who we were having over or what we were doing next month stopped being discussions. I would find out afterward, halfway through, or in the exact moment I was already expected to smile and go along with it. And every time I pushed back even gently, Ryan had the same look. Calm, mild, almost amused, like I was overcomplicating something simple, like wanting mutual respect was the same thing as being difficult. That was what got under my skin most. Not just the words, the smoothness, the ease, the way he could reduce me without ever raising his voice. I noticed it before I admitted it. I kept telling myself it was stress, timing, miscommunication, the normal wear and tear of two people trying to build a life together. I wanted there to be an innocent explanation because the alternative was uglier. The alternative was that Ryan had stopped seeing me as a partner long before I stopped calling him one. The night everything finally became impossible to ignore started like any other. We were out with a group of people, mostly his friends, though after almost 2 years I knew them well enough to smile at the right stories and laugh in the right places. It was one of those loud, casual evenings where everyone talks over each other and no one is paying close attention to anything serious. Glasses clinking. Someone passing around fries. A couple at the far end of the table arguing playfully about a vacation. Somebody's phone lighting up every few minutes. Nothing about it felt important. Nothing about it looked like the night my relationship would end. Ryan was in a good mood. Too good, maybe. Relaxed in that polished way he got when there was an audience. He was charming when other people were watching. Not fake exactly, just edited. I remember watching him laugh at something one of his friends said and thinking how strange it was that lately I felt lonelier, sitting beside him, than I ever did alone. Then the conversation turned to weekend plans. Someone asked Ryan what he was doing, and he answered casually, like it had already been said, like I had already been included. Probably heading out of town. For half a second, I thought I had misheard him. I turned toward him. "You're going somewhere?" I didn't ask in an accusing tone. I wasn't trying to embarrass him. I was trying to understand why I was hearing about a trip for the first time in the middle of a group dinner. He barely glanced at me. "Yeah, probably." That tiny answer did something unpleasant in my chest. Not because of the trip itself, because of the ease, because he didn't seem surprised that I didn't know, because not telling me had apparently felt normal to him. "With who?" I asked. That was when he turned and looked at me fully, and smiled. Not warmly, not apologetically, not even awkwardly, lightly, like I had walked into a setup and he knew it. Then he said, "Stop acting like we're married." The table went quiet for less than a second. Then someone laughed. Then another person laughed harder. And just like that, the moment changed shape. It stopped being a private humiliation and became entertainment. Ryan leaned back in his chair like he had said something harmless, something clever. "You don't get a say in where I go or who I'm with," he added. That got more laughter. One of his friends muttered, Damn, under her breath, like she was watching a scene in a show she didn't want to interrupt. My face stayed composed. That part still surprises me when I think about it. I didn't snap. I didn't throw my drink. I didn't demand he repeat himself. I didn't ask the table if humiliating your girlfriend in public had suddenly become a group activity. I smiled. Small, controlled, almost polite, and I stayed quiet. From the outside, it probably looked like I let it slide, like I wasn't that bothered, like I knew he was joking. But that wasn't what happened. Something in me went still, because sometimes the most painful thing a person can do is not scream, not cheat in front of you, not create a dramatic scandal. Sometimes they just tell the truth too casually. That was what made it land. Ryan didn't look angry when he said it. He didn't look cornered. He didn't look like a man saying something reckless in the heat of the moment. He looked comfortable. That was what stayed with me for the rest of the night. Not just the words, the ease, the certainty, the fact that he said them like he had been thinking that way for a long time. Conversation eventually started moving again around us, because that's what groups do when the discomfort doesn't belong to them. Someone changed the subject. Another round of drinks showed up. A story started at the far end of the table. People moved on. But I didn't. I sat there smiling at the right moments, answering when spoken to, nodding when needed, while something cold and precise settled into place inside me. Not rage, recognition. On the drive home, Ryan didn't mention what happened. Not once. No, I didn't mean it like that. No, that came out wrong. No hand on my knee. No glance across the console. No attempt to repair the damage. He drove with one hand on the wheel and the radio low, as if the night had passed exactly as expected. And that told me more than the dinner had, because if a man humiliates you in public and feels no need to explain himself in private, then the disrespect wasn't accidental. It was structural. By the time we got home, I already knew something had shifted. I just didn't know yet how far I was willing to follow that truth. The next morning, Ryan brought up the trip again. This time, like a man confirming logistics, not discussing them. "I'm leaving Friday," he said. I looked at him over my coffee, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel confused. I felt awake. I held his gaze for a second longer than usual, like I was checking something I hadn't been ready to check before. "For how long?" I asked. "Just the weekend," Ryan replied, already scrolling through his phone like the answer closed the topic. I nodded. Okay. That was it. No follow-up questions, no attempt to circle back to dinner, no effort to redefine what we were or weren't. And that was the moment he noticed something was off. Not immediately, not dramatically, just a slight pause. Like he had expected resistance, or confusion, or at least curiosity. Instead, he got none of it. He looked up at me again, this time actually studying my face. "That's it?" he asked. "That's it," I said calmly, turning back to my coffee. He waited, like there was supposed to be more. There wasn't. And for the first time in a long time, I could see it unsettled him, not because I had said something harsh, but because I hadn't. The next few days didn't turn tense. They turned quiet, but not the fragile kind that sits on top of an argument waiting to explode. This was different, cleaner. We still moved around each other, shared meals, passed in the hallway, sat on opposite ends of the couch at night. From the outside, nothing looked broken. But internally, something had already ended. I stopped asking where he was going, stopped wondering who he was texting, stopped trying to read between the lines of his tone, his pauses, his half-answers. It wasn't discipline, it was absence. That part of me had switched off. Ryan noticed it in pieces. "You're being quiet," he said one evening, leaning against the kitchen counter while I rinsed a plate. "Am I?" I replied without looking at him. "Yes," I shrugged. "Just thinking." "About what?" I dried my hands slowly, buying myself a second I didn't actually need. "Things," I said. It wasn't a deflection. It was the truth, just not one he had access to anymore. He watched me for a moment longer, like he was trying to figure out if this was temporary. If this was a mood, if I was waiting for him to fix something. Then, when I didn't give him anything to work with, he let it go. That was another pattern I hadn't fully acknowledged before. Ryan didn't push. He adjusted. If something required effort, confrontation, or emotional labor he didn't want to engage in, he simply stepped around it. And for a long time, I had mistaken that for peace. By Thursday night, his trip felt like a fact that had always existed. Not something recent, not something surprising, just another decision that didn't include me. He packed casually. That was the part I remember most clearly. No hesitation, no sense that he was leaving anything behind. He moved through the bedroom, pulling out shirts, folding them with the same steady rhythm he used every morning getting ready for work, like this weekend existed in a separate category from everything else. Like wherever he was going, whatever he was doing, didn't overlap with the life we supposedly shared. I stood in the doorway for a moment, watching him. Not with suspicion, not even with hurt, just observation. "You'll text me when you get there?" I asked. He glanced up briefly. "Yeah." "Okay." Another small pause, like he was waiting again. For what? I wasn't sure. Maybe for me to ask more. Maybe for me to care in a way that confirmed something for him. But I didn't. And this time, he didn't hide the flicker of confusion. "You're really not going to ask anything?" he said. I leaned lightly against the doorframe. "About what?" He let out a small breath through his nose. "Nothing." Then he went back to packing. That moment stayed with me longer than it should have. Not because of what was said, because of what wasn't. He wanted a reaction. Not necessarily because he cared about my feelings, but because my reaction reinforced his role in the dynamic. If I questioned him, he could dismiss me. If I pushed, he could calm me. If I got upset, he could label it. But without that, there was nothing for him to manage. And for the first time, I wasn't giving him anything to manage. Friday came quietly. He grabbed his bag near the door, checked his phone, then looked at me like he was running through a mental checklist. "I'll text you," he said again. "Okay," I replied. No goodbye kiss, no pause, just the sound of the door closing behind him. And then nothing. The apartment didn't feel empty. That was the strange part. I had expected silence to feel heavy, to echo, to make the absence obvious. Instead, it felt clearer, like a room after someone finally stops talking. That night, I didn't sit around waiting for his messages. I didn't replay the dinner. I didn't imagine scenarios. Instead, I walked through the apartment slowly, deliberately. The couch, the kitchen, the hallway, the bedroom. I noticed things I had stopped noticing. Where my things ended and his began. What I had bought, what I maintained, what I had quietly absorbed responsibility for over time without ever labeling it. It wasn't about tallying. It was about seeing. My phone buzzed around midnight. Made it. Place is nice. I waited a few seconds, then typed back. Good. No emoji, no follow-up, no question. Saturday morning, another message. Weather's good here. Nice, I replied. That was the rhythm of the weekend. Surface level, neutral, detached. And with every exchange, it became clearer that whatever connection we thought we had wasn't being tested by distance. It had already been reduced long before he left. By Saturday night, I understood something I should have accepted earlier. Ryan had already defined the relationship. He just hadn't expected me to accept that definition and act on it. Sunday moved slower, not because I was waiting, because I had stopped reaching, stopped adjusting, stopped negotiating silently with a version of him that didn't exist anymore. By the time evening came, my decision wasn't emotional. It wasn't fueled by anger or revenge. It was simple and overdue. My phone lit up again. Heading back soon. I looked at the message, set the phone down, and smiled. Not out of relief, not out of happiness, but because I finally knew exactly what I was going to do when he got back. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to confirm. By Sunday evening, the apartment felt different. Not in the old, shared, lived-in way. Defined. I stood in the middle of the living room for a long moment, just looking around. The couch where I had spent nights waiting for him to finish work, calls that somehow always stretched longer than necessary. The kitchen counter where I had adjusted my schedule to match his meals, his routines, his preferences. The hallway where I used to pause, listening for his footsteps, measuring his mood before deciding how to speak. I hadn't realized how much of myself I had been calibrating until there was nothing left to calibrate to. That was what stayed with me. Not what he said at dinner, not even the way everyone laughed. It was the realization that I had been slowly shrinking without noticing it, and he had been perfectly comfortable letting that happen. My phone buzzed again. Almost there. I read it and set it back down. Still no reply, because at that point, responding would have meant reopening something I had already closed. Instead, I walked into the bedroom, opened into the closet, and for the first time, I didn't see it as ours. I saw sections. What was mine? What wasn't? I moved slowly, not rushed, not angry, just precise. His jackets came down first, then shirts, then the things he had left in drawers like they would always be there. I folded everything neatly, not out of kindness, out of closure. I wasn't throwing his life out in pieces. I was returning it to him intact, just no longer inside mine. By the time I was done, his belongings were packed in 2 bags near the door, organized, accessible, temporary. I checked my phone again. No new messages. Good. That gave me time for the part that actually mattered. I sat down at the table with my laptop, opened the lease agreement, scrolled, and stopped. My name, only mine. That had been true from the beginning. Ryan had moved in later, gradually, until it felt like something shared. But legally, it never had been. I leaned back slightly in my chair, letting that settle, not as a technicality, as fact. The next call took less than 5 minutes. Hi, I need to have the locks changed. The man on the other end asked for the address. Confirmed availability, quoted a time. I can have someone there within 2 hours. That's fine, I said. When I ended the call, I didn't feel dramatic. I felt aligned, like something that had been out of place for a long time had finally clicked back where it belonged. 2 hours later, the knock came. I opened the door to a man carrying a toolbox and a polite, neutral expression. Lock replacement? He asked. Yes. He worked efficiently. No small talk, no unnecessary questions, just the sound of metal shifting, tools clicking, mechanisms being removed and replaced. At one point, he tested the new lock, then handed me the key. Try it. I stepped forward, inserted the key, turned it, and heard the click. Solid, reliable, mine. Everything's set, he said, packing up his tools. Thank you. After he left, the apartment felt different again, not emptier. Final. I placed the new keys on the table, one for me. No extras, no assumptions, no shared access. For a moment I stood there listening. No anticipation, no waiting for a door to open, no wondering what version of Ryan would walk in. Because that version no longer had a way in. Night fell slowly. I turned on a lamp in the living room and sat on the couch. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about him at all. Not what he was doing, not who he was with, not whether he would call or explain or try to fix anything. Those questions didn't matter anymore. Around an hour later, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Familiar ones, measured, confident, the kind that assumes the door will open. Then the sound of a key against the lock. A pause, a slight adjustment, another attempt. Longer this time, then a sharper movement. The metal didn't give. I stayed where I was. Still, listening. Another try. This one with more force, then silence. A confused, quiet kind of silence. The kind that happens when reality doesn't match expectation. A second later, a soft knock. Naomi? His voice. Controlled, but different. I didn't move, not yet. Because this moment wasn't about rushing to explain. It was about letting him feel exactly what I had felt at that table, being outside something he thought he understood. Then another knock, louder. Naomi, the key's not working. I stood up slowly, not out of hesitation, out of intention. Before I reached the door, I heard another voice. Mrs. Collins, my neighbor, always observant, always precise with her timing. Oh, she said casually, you're back. Yeah, Ryan replied, confusion creeping in. My key's not working. A small pause. Then she said, just as calmly, she had the locks changed this afternoon. Silence. Thicker this time. What? Ryan asked, the word sharp and immediate. She had someone come by earlier, Mrs. Collins continued. New locks, New keys. Thought you knew. Another pause. Longer. He what? I reached for the handle, and this time I opened the door. Ryan stood there exactly how I expected. A bag slung over one shoulder, another resting by his leg. His expression caught between confusion and irritation, like reality had glitched, and he was waiting for it to correct itself. But the moment his eyes landed on me, something shifted. "What is going on, Isel?" he asked immediately. No greeting, no hesitation, just demand. I didn't answer right away. I let the moment sit between us, let him feel it. The same way I had sat at that table, smiling while something inside me rearranged itself quietly and completely. Then I said, calm and even, "You said we're not married." His brow tightened. "What does that have to do with anything?" "It means," I replied, holding his gaze, "you don't live here anymore." For a second, nothing registered on his face. Then a flicker. "You're joking," he said. "I'm not." His posture shifted, irritation pushing forward now that confusion had somewhere to go. "You changed the locks?" "Yes." "Without telling me?" There it was, that expectation, that assumption that he was owed a conversation he had never once offered me. I tilted my head slightly. "Just like you made plans without telling me." That landed. I saw it, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough. "That's not the same thing," he snapped, stepping a little closer. "It is," I said. He let out a short breath, shaking his head like I was being unreasonable. "No, it's not. Me going on a trip doesn't mean you lock me out of my own place." I didn't raise my voice, didn't step back, didn't fill the space with anything unnecessary. "It's not your place." That stopped him. Not the words themselves, the certainty behind them. "What?" he said, quieter this time. "I'm the one on the lease," I continued. "I'm the one paying for it. That doesn't mean—" "It means exactly what it means," I cut in. "You made it clear we're not building anything shared." His jaw tightened. "That's not what I meant," he said quickly. But there was something different in his tone now. Not control, correction. He was adjusting, trying to pull the moment back into something he could manage. "You meant exactly what you said," I replied. A pause stretched between us. For the first time since I opened the door, he didn't have an immediate response. His eyes flicked past me briefly, scanning the apartment behind my shoulder. I knew what he was seeing. The space, the absence, the shift. "You packed my stuff?" he asked. "Yes." "Seriously?" "Yes." Another silence. This one heavier. Because now the situation wasn't abstract anymore. It wasn't about a comment at dinner or a disagreement over boundaries. It was physical, real, done. "You're overreacting," he said finally. But the confidence wasn't there anymore, not like before. I shook my head. "No." He exhaled sharply. "Naomi, come on." "I'm not overreacting," I said, cutting through the tone he was trying to use. "I'm responding." "To what?" he asked, frustration slipping through now. "To what you made clear." That landed harder than anything else I had said, because it stripped everything down. No drama, no accusation, no exaggeration, just truth. He looked at me like he was trying to find the version of me that would have softened by now, the one who would have explained more, argued more, given him something to work with. But that version wasn't standing in front of him anymore. "So that's it?" he asked. "You're just ending everything like this?" I took a breath, not because I needed it, because I wanted to answer correctly. "No," I said. "You ended it when you made it clear I don't have a place in your decisions." "That's not what I said," he pushed back immediately. "It is," I replied. "You just didn't think I'd agree with you." That was the moment it settled. For both of us. Because now he understood something he hadn't before. This wasn't emotional. It wasn't impulsive. It wasn't something he could wait out. It was a decision that had already been made. "What am I supposed to do now?" he asked. The question came out quieter, less certain. I glanced down at this bag near his feet, then back at him. "You already had plans." Silence. Not tense, not explosive, just final. He stood there for a few seconds longer, like he was waiting for something. For me to step back, to change my tone, to give him an opening. but nothing moved. Eventually, he let out a small, disbelieving breath. "Wow," he muttered. I didn't respond. There was nothing left that needed to be said. He adjusted the strap on his shoulder, picked up the second bag, and stepped back. Not dramatically, not angrily, just slowly, like he was still catching up to something that had already passed him. For a brief second, our eyes met again, and I could see it. Not regret, not fully, but realization. Then he turned and walked down the hallway. This time, he didn't knock again. The hallway went quiet faster than I expected. No raised voice, no second attempt, no last-minute argument thrown over his shoulder like a lifeline. Just footsteps fading. Then nothing. I stood there for a few seconds after he disappeared, the door still open, the air between inside and outside hanging in that strange, weightless way it does when something irreversible has just happened. Mrs. Collins glanced at me from across the hall. She didn't ask questions, didn't offer commentary. Just gave a small nod, subtle and understanding, like she had seen enough in her life to recognize a clean ending when it happened. I returned the nod. Then I closed the door. The click of the lock was soft, but it echoed. I turned the key once more, just to feel it. Solid. Certain. For a moment, I stood with my hand still on the handle, expecting something. Relief. Sadness. Even doubt. But none of that came. What came instead was calm. The kind that settles instead of pressing on you. I walked back into the living room slowly, not because anything had changed physically, because everything had shifted context. The couch wasn't where we watched things together anymore. It was just where I chose to sit. The kitchen wasn't where I adjusted meals around his schedule. It was where I ate when I wanted to. I picked up my phone. No new messages. Good. I didn't want noise right then. About 20 minutes later, it buzzed. An unknown number. I didn't need to open it to know. Still, I did. "Naomi, this is Ryan. My phone died. We need to talk." I stared at the screen for a few seconds, not reading between the lines, not trying to decode tone, just seeing it for what it was. A delayed reaction. A reach. I locked the phone without replying. A minute later, it buzzed again. "You can't just do that without warning." Another one. "This isn't how you handle things." I exhaled slowly. Not because it was funny, because it was predictable. The same structure, the same assumption. That he still had a say in how I chose to respond. I placed the phone face down on the table, let it vibrate once more, then go still. That was the last message I read. Later that night, I took a shower, changed the sheets, and opened the windows. Small things, normal things. But each one felt intentional, not like I was erasing him, like I was resetting myself. The next morning, the apartment looked exactly the same, but it felt lighter, not because something had been added, because something unnecessary was gone. I made coffee, sat by the window, and for once, I didn't check my phone first. I just sat, watched the street, let time move without trying to fill it. By the afternoon, a message came through from a mutual friend. "Hey, Ryan told me what happened. Are you okay?" I typed back, "I'm fine." That was all. No explanation. No justification, because the situation didn't need context. Over the next few days, there were a few more indirect messages. Another friend mentioning he was confused. Someone else saying he didn't expect it to go that far. I didn't respond to any of it beyond what was necessary, not out of stubbornness, out of completion. 2 months later, everything felt lighter, not in a dramatic, life-changing way. Nothing about my routine had turned into something new or exciting. I still woke up at the same time, still made coffee the same way, still walked past the same streets, the same buildings, the same quiet corners of the day, but everything felt different, because none of it felt negotiated anymore. The apartment, my apartment, no longer held that invisible tension of adjustment. No more subtle calculations about mood, tone, timing. No more filtering thoughts before speaking. No more waiting to see how something would land before deciding if it was safe to say it. I rearranged a few things over the weeks, not out of necessity, out of preference. The couch shifted slightly closer to the window. The kitchen shelves cleared of things I never used, but kept because he did. The closet finally had space that didn't feel borrowed. I heard about Ryan a few times, never directly, always through other people. A friend mentioning he'd been asking about me. Another saying he didn't see it coming. Someone else hinting he wanted to explain, to talk, to clear things up. I didn't ask what that meant, because I already knew. There was nothing unclear about what happened. One evening, about 6 weeks in, I ran into someone from that same dinner, one of the women who had laughed. She hesitated when she saw me, then gave a small, uncertain smile. "Hey, Naomi," she said. "How have you been?" "Good," I replied. There was a pause, the kind that fills itself with everything people don't know how to say. "I heard about everything," she added carefully. I nodded once. "Yeah." She shifted her weight slightly. "I didn't think he meant it like that," she said. That night, I looked at her for a second. Not defensive, not upset, just sure. "He did," I said. That was it. No elaboration, no need to convince. She nodded slowly, like something had clicked too late. "Right," she said quietly. We said goodbye after that. No tension, no awkwardness, just understanding, and maybe a little discomfort. That night, I walked back into my apartment, set my keys down on the table, and paused for a moment in the doorway. It was quiet, soft, still. And for the first time in a long time, that quiet didn't ask anything of me. It didn't expect me to fill it. It didn't remind me of anything missing. It just existed. I stepped inside, closed the door, and locked it. Not out of habit, out of choice. There's something people don't talk about enough when it comes to relationships. They focus on betrayal when it's loud, when it's obvious, when it gives you something clear to point at. But the more dangerous kind is quieter. It's the moment someone shows you exactly how little space you occupy in their decisions, and you decide to explain it away instead of believe it. I used to think understanding someone meant giving them the benefit of the doubt, giving them time, giving them space, trying to interpret what they said in the kindest possible way. Now I understand something simpler. If someone tells you that you don't get a say, believe them, and then decide very carefully where they get to stand in your life.